It's like, I don't know.
Are we ready?
Yeah.
Are we good?
Sure.
Yeah,
Let's
do it. Let's kick some butt.
You have all the thumbs up.
Tara, are we good?
I'm rocking and rolling, splishing and splashing.
All right. Testing 1, 2, 3. Nope, my mic's not on.
Is this live? Yes, it is. Okay.
All right. Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Sweet, we are on. All right, guys, it is 10 o'clock, and thank you so much for coming to our panel all the way out in the library here. It is something very, very near and dear to my heart, and we have lots of interesting folks here to tell you about their personal stories and why this is very important to us. My name is Lorraine Garrison. Thank you guys so much once again. Thank you, San Diego Comic-Con, for continuously having us present and tell stories that matter to us as fans, and as creators, and as educators. So let me start off the panel. Oh, all right. Once again, my name is Lorraine Garrison. I have here Perry Clark, Natasha Lee, Chance Calloway, Robert Rice, and Tara Madison Avery. Oh, next slide. Oh, okay. So for a brief moment here, I would like to have some land acknowledgement. Basically, we are honoring and respecting the indigenous people that came before us. I am wearing all Navajo, handmade Navajo jewelry today in that honor. We are on Kumeyaay land, and so I just wanted to acknowledge that. If you need copies of these slides later, here's the QR code. Please feel free to take a picture of that. And, contact me. I'm a school psychologist. I love talking to folks and people and, giving resources. That's the thing that I do. And I'll change it to the next slide when everyone is ready. All right, fantastic. All right, next slide. Yes. Statistics. Well, I talked to some folks outside, and we were talking about why this panel mattered to them. So who here knows about adverse childhood experiences? Great. Okay. I might need to do a 101, so that's okay. So Kaiser and the CDC did a study of over 20,000 people from like 95 to, I want to say 2000 or so, and they followed a whole bunch of folks. And essentially, they found out that there had some risk factors had physical, not only emotional risk factors, but physical risk factors. If you had this in your childhood, it didn't matter through economics or culture or anything like that. So they fall under these three categories. If you could take this online under NPR or any of the ACEs tests, if you had physical abuse, emotional abuse, or sexual abuse, those are one of the risk factors for how would I say this? For health issues as you get older, emotional issues. The other category is neglect. So if you had physical or emotional neglect as a child, once again, these are like strong risk factors to indicate that you had a higher propensity for heart disease or depression, things like that. And finally, household dysfunction. That is the third category. If your parents were divorced, if there was mental illness, if there was alcoholism, substance abuse, any of those categories that happened within your family household, the high propensity for health issues. So, okay. So here are the health conditions, depressive disorder, 44% of people. If you had any of those ACEs, I have all of these statistics from the CDC, asthma, kidney disease, pulmonary disease, cancer, diabetes, and obesity. So, a lot of folks think about like, oh, why has this happened to me? Well, there's actually studies of that. I'll go on the next slide. Okay. And then we look at the health implications. So you have all these health implications because of the trauma that you experienced as a child. So this includes like alcoholism, drug use, missed work, absenteeism in schools, once again, all the different broken bones, higher propensities, STDs, etc. Oh, am I doing this backwards? Next slide, please. I am doing this backwards. Can you go back? Yep, that one, ACEs. So do folks know about school to prison pipelines? Sweet. Okay, so I don't need to do the 101. So as we could see, there's a correlation with the ACEs, the trauma that a person has experiences, and their likelihood to end up in prison. And as we know, Black and Latino boys are 3 to 6 times more likely to be in prison, and also be suspended from school. And that we also know that 70% of, I think it's 50% of the people who are incarcerated, have been in jail or something similar to that. So we're very much aware that this is an issue. All right. And then even for LGBTQIA is that even at a higher risk for suicide ideation. So here are the statistics of suicide ideation between typical kids and kids who identify as LGBTQIA. I'll do the next slide. All right, and this is more from the Trevor Project. I mean, it's really important why we care about LGBTQIA. All right, next slide, please. All right, and so basically our talk is how to close that gap. And one of the recommendations that we have is to become trauma-informed. And trauma-informed basically means is to understand where the student is coming from, right? So have that conversation, have that relationship with them. Who's aware of trauma-informed care? Awesome, this is great, I love this. So social emotional learning, that is like a big push in schools right now. And cultural competence and understanding. And our big push here is to build those relationships within the community. Next slide, please. Oh. And so other recommendations of supporting queer spaces, creating safe spaces, using correct pronouns, humanize each individual experiences, education still between sex and gender. Sex is how, basically what one is attracted to, and the other is how the person identifies as. Centering youth around the apologies. So if there is, like if you misused a pronoun, make the youth the center of that. Use that restorative justice. Who's aware of restorative justice? You guys are wonderful. Funding, education, understanding implicit bias. Who understands what implicit bias? Man, I will be happy when I don't ever have to do these talks again. So basically implicit bias is understanding our own biases. And then, understand that impact is more important than intent. So, the apology of, I'm sorry you felt that way is not good enough, right? It's like, I'm sorry, how do I make it better for you? And then, understanding what is performative, like, what is tokenism, like you just have a person of color or an LGBT or a rainbow flag in your classroom, but like actually, embody it and understand where that student is coming from. So with that being said, now that I've front-loaded you with everything, I'll turn it over to the panel and give their experiences and say why this is really important and how to support LGBTQIA and being neurodivergent and what that means. Next slide. All right, Perry, take it away.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. All righty. So my name is Perry Clark. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist up in the Silicon Valley area. And what I'm going to first and foremost talk to you is about the idea and the concept of shame. Now, everything that Lorraine has just been talking about is often delivered to all of us in the form of shame. And so we can understand why I say this. Here's the definition from the dictionary of what shame is: a painful emotion caused by consciousness of guilt, shortcomings, or improprieties. And especially that last one, improprieties. Improprieties are established by what is, shall we say, the dominant typical culture. So it's very easy for that mechanism of shame to be used much more about improprieties. So the improprieties of our sexuality, the improprieties of our neurodiversity, as a way to affect change, but change to fit in with the dominant typical social ideal, which is white, male, heteronormative. So there's also the aspect of how universality, which is the mechanism that is attempting to try and combat the shame, but in its own way also limits, because it cuts back on the diversity that make up our lives and our experiences. So as the conversations that's happened in the last couple of weeks has been the classic one of I don't see color, which is the aspect of losing the experiences that came from being colored in this entire environment that shapes a person. We also have the aspect of I don't see gender. How has that also affected people's development and why they're making choices in their lives? And we find other forms of this also come into the idea of the monolith, the idea that someone is just a single story or a single identity when we have multiple identities. And in fact, think about it. Up until, say, 1995 to 2000, every one of us who is here because of our interest in comics, movies, fantasies, and so forth, were considered people to be shamed because of our interests. And yet look at this place, look at all of us here, and how much money we have been spending to build this industry. And yet, prior to that period of time, we would be shamed for our interests. And so it comes up in other forms too, from the colorism, the implicit bias, internalized racism, even how our neurodiversity and our sexualities were part of the DSM, which is the dietistical manual of various pathologies that we use in mental health. And as a result of that, there's a lot of energy that has to be done
Next slide.
Yep.
Yes, next slide, please.
Sorry. Usually I have button control, so.
Yes, we usually have button controls here.
Right, so there's a lot of energy that gets put into just being able to survive in the, shall we say, the dominant culture. And that energy that gets put into masking and or code switching, depending on the situation. And this does have a psychological toll, as well as physiological toll, which is some of what we just saw with the ACEs. There. The psychological toll becomes that aspect of when can somebody actually rest in being their authentic selves. Any situation they're in, especially if they have multiple intersections, means there's multiple places that they can rest in one facet, but not in others. And that's all taking up energy. And just for examples of the struggles that go on there, in the pictures you see from Lovecraft Country, this character of Ruby Baptiste, as both her black form as well as her white body form she gets in the story of the series.
Who's seen this? Love. Okay, great. Thank you. Yes.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And the experiences, for those of you who have watched it, she has being able to see both worlds and even the price she's willing to pay to maintain access to that other world, which comes at the cost of other relationships that she could be putting energy in and finding balance in. Another classic one is the one from Star Trek, Worf's discombination and exile from the Klingon people. And I think for those, that one's been around for quite a while. And then of course we have Get Out. How many have seen that one? Exactly, and especially the idea of the smiling black person who is more than willing to also to sell you down the river to maintain their position. And that also becomes a protective measure that's done, but also it becomes destructive. Next slide. But at the same time we have these destructive images, we also have images that are about building and taking pride in our positions and our relationships, and we have more of those stories, which again, part of why we are all here, because we are not living under that identity of shame and having pride as LGBT people as well as neurodiverse. So just the story of Valkyrie, which unfortunately I admit I have not had a chance to see Love and Thunder yet, But if you consider when she first made her appearance in Ragnarok, there's actually a cut scene from the beginning of it with her and Hildegard that was showing the aspect of her cross-gender relationship with Hildegard before they went off and dealt with Hela. Or currently what we see in Star Trek Discovery with Culberts and Stamets, their relationship, an actual married couple, gay couple, in a science fiction series. There's Owen.
I had to put in some of my few favorites. Who's seen Schitt's Creek? David Rose. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's not a problem.
Love David Rose.
Not a problem. Even then, we also have Laverna Cox, who from Orange is the New Black, who has been also funding the creation of multiple other LGBT and neurodiverse material as well. And then for those of us who are Doctor Who fans, there's also Bill Potts, who was an out, proud lesbian black woman in that series.
And I put in Hedwig because that was my first, my first understanding and humanizing the trans experience. So that's why I had to give honor to that, because I was taken to this movie and I was like, oh my God, what is this? So I had to honor that, but that was me.
But that extent of our enjoyment doesn't just end with the idea of we can always watch these shows and buy all their products. We also have the aspect of cosplay as well.
Next slide, please.
Oops, sorry. Still not have that control. As cosplay, because there is also that aspect of we are embodying that particular character as we would see them if we were playing that character in our heads, in that mental space. And now we also want to just point out, as you can see there up in the upper corner, there's talking about the aspect of blackface and not blackface. None of these other characters you see here have to be blackface. Because, I mean, the classic idea is that we are putting ourselves in that role. So we're dressing up in those uniforms, we're dressing up with all that gear. And that doesn't mean that it has to look blackface. And then you can see that there's a number of aspects of we're also getting the cross-bending, such as the lower corner of we have a man dressed up in a Wonder Woman's outfit. Now, I'm just using that as an obvious gender identification, but for all I know, that person sees themselves as non-binary. And that's okay, because we are embodying that power and not living in shame. So for those of you who work in the educational industry or work with children or anyone in that nature, one of the biggest questions you can do to ask and help with addressing this is asking what are they feeling they're being shamed about. Understand where shame is being weaponized in their lives.
And that cultural context too, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Next slide, please.
So that I hand over to Natasha.
Thank you. Okay. Natasha, please introduce yourself and tell us your background and tell us all the wonderful things you have. And oh my gosh, so can I, or do you want me to do an introduction?
Oh, I mean, you can.
Natasha is, who has played Spider-Man on the PS5? Y'all, she's the woman. So she has one of the Easter eggs in that video game, the Miles Morales one of the Black Lives Matter mural. And so she's done many things, but that's the one I like to brag about. But go ahead.
Thank you so much. Yes, I'm Natasha Lee, and I work in the video game industry. I work at Insomniac Games, and I was able to advocate for my voice to help get that Black Lives Matter mural into the game. And it comes.
Next slide, please.
When we think about too the getting that representation of people, of your character within games, it's about being seen, it's about that representation. And so for this, when it comes to getting better representation for LGBTQ plus individuals, it's about being able to advocate for that group. So just trying to be in the room whenever you can. Whenever I have the chance or whenever I have the opportunity, I try to speak up and ask, like, is someone else included? Have we thought about this person? Have we thought about this individual, or have we thought about this group? And as we continue through, ever since I was a child, it's growing up as a Black child, it's very hard to see, positive representations of yourself. And even when you think about seeing LGBTQ folks within the media as well, whenever I see them, I always feel like, either they're hypersexualized or they're put off as just the butt of a joke. And so, trying to move forward to get that positive representation within the video game sphere, within comic books and movies, it's just about making sure that people are heard and able to have a seat at the table. And so whenever I don't have the opportunity to be a part of that group, I try to make sure that we find reasons or resources in order to make sure that we can get individuals who can speak on the topic. Or, if you are feeling like you know someone who can't speak for themselves, ask them if they're willing to allow you to bring up something that may benefit them if they don't have, the ability to use their own voice. And I think that that's very important, especially when it comes to our children, when we're thinking about, not being able to either express yourself or just making yourself available to hear people and understand how to convey someone else's voice so that they are seen, that they are heard, and they are represented. And so going forward, that's pretty much how I try to go through the industry. As far as being on this panel, I just try to make sure that I'm visible. Lorraine did touch on tokenism, and even when it comes to being visible within the studio or being visible at a convention, even if I might be the only Black person in the space, I try to volunteer myself. As awkward as it is, I have anxiety, depression. I suffer a lot with social anxiety a lot, and it takes so much for me to work myself into this position, but I think that I maybe have been in a different place if I had been able to see myself in this position when I was a child. And so that's something that I know it may be uncomfortable, or when you're trying to help someone, if you're trying to help expand their voice, just thinking about that this may be able to affect someone more positively if they're able to see them rather than, taking it as tokenizing yourself. And I know that there's that harmful and it can be a derogatory term, and it is, and I think that I try to flip it positively, that I am being seen for just that one person who may have needed to see me or hear me in the space so that they can know that it may be safe for them and know that this can be a place for them. I didn't get into the game industry until I was pretty much in my 30s, and so it's not the fact that growing up as a child, I didn't know that a Black queer person could be in games. I only got to see straight white males in the game industry, and so being able to have other voices, and I had my sister. She actually. Her mother advocated for her, my god sister, her mother advocated for her to just pursue whatever she dreamed of. And so my family is very structured, very strict. My father, wanted me to get a very, science six-figure job. He was just like, you need to stay on this cut. You need to just continue outside of arts, there's that ideal that, people will be a starving artist. And so being able to use my resources around me, my community around me, people who were able to support me and push me, I think that that's very important. So whenever you feel like you don't have a voice, or I think that we have so much community within this geek game sphere that someone is there to advocate for you. And I think that just sending them a LinkedIn message, an Instagram message is a way to kind of reach out and see if someone can help support you.
Thank you so much. Next slide, please. All right, and this is my friend Chance. Do you want me to introduce, or you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, I want to hear what you have to say about me.
Oh my gosh, okay. I'm so sorry. Well, Chance is another friend of mine that I was introduced through a friend of a friend, and Chance has had the wonderful opportunity to be a writer, producer of his own TV show on Amazon called Pretty Dudes. And he started out as a writer, and what was your experience like being in Hollywood, being a Black gay male, trying to write? I mean, what's that experience?
Well, I write out of necessity. I always feel like there are certain stories that have to be out of the world, and they kind of like beat their way out of me, and so I feel like, oh, this is a story I want to tell, and I would write something, and then I would pitch it, and you know, people would say no for many reasons. Usually, there weren't enough white people, there weren't enough straight people, there weren't, you know, it was one thing or another. And that's actually when I started to just write and produce and direct my own things, because I wanted to make sure that these stories got told. I'm probably a big offender of the hypersexualization, though, I will say that much.
Okay. So the reason why I have so many different people here on the panel is to show that, you know, LGBTQIA, people of color, we're not all a monolith. And so that this is what Chance is making fun of, is the whole stereotype, right?
It's funny to me because, I mean, I call it sex comedy, because I usually balance it out with a lot of humor. But I've learned that I didn't even know that was my humor. It was just, I would just start writing. I'm like, what am I writing? This is ridiculous. And I kind of stuck with it because, again, you know, we need representation is one of those words that kind of loses its impact because we've heard it so much, but we do need it, and we need to see ourselves in all varieties, all facets, all shades. I remember the first time I saw, you know, Moonlight and how deeply that impacted me, and then I saw this film at Outfest just a few days ago, Punks, by Patrick Ian Polk, and I remember thinking, the movie came out in 2000, didn't get distribution, and I thought, if I had seen this movie in the year 2000, it could have changed the trajectory of my life. It could have made things a lot less painful. So I love the fact that I can open up a comic book or watch one of my favorite shows or listen to music, and there is representation there, and that, you know, it feels good to see that other people are having the same lived-in experiences, or similar, or completely different lived-in experiences that you have, and who are walking a similar path in life.
My apologies. I'm having a little bit difficulty. I was trying to show your second slide here of Pretty Dudes, the novel, and if when we have time for Q&A, we have some giveaways, and I see some giveaways there. So thank you so much for your story. Now, Robert has a similar story with his. Can I introduce you? Is that
please.
Okay, awesome.
I don't know if my
So
mic's
my
on,
friend
but-
Robert here, he and his partner created a TV show that is on Here TV and also on Amazon Prime, called Demon Hunter. And the tagline, which I love, is "The Gay Buffy Slayer."
Yes.
Now, it is not for children, so
No.
we love the horror movies, but it is not. So, in any case, now, you know, Robert's TV show came after Chance, which I think is very interesting.
Yes.
You know, now both of you guys, did you both have web series first? Because I know Robert did. Chance, did you have a web series too?
No, actually. I made the horrible mistake of just jumping in.
Oh, okay. You spent a lot of money then.
I did, yeah.
All right, well, Robert, can you please tell your experience about what is it like being a white gay male in the industry, how that was, you know, that was probably a struggle, and, you know, please tell your experiences.
Well, to start, so Demon Hunter did come out of necessity, much like I think what you're going to
Next
hear
slide,
me
please.
echo a lot of what has been said, is like there just wasn't a lot of representation that I wanted to see of queer people, especially I think stuff that really reflected what it is like to be queer, because you might find queer people in a show, like a gay, a lesbian, but queer people who are out often have queer friend groups, right? Or like at least diverse friend groups, you know? So we created a show called Demon Hunter, which, yes, Buffy, but make it gayer, or as my very straight brother called it, Buffy meets Queer as Folk meets Skinamax.
Skinamax.
And to that point, that hypersexualization of queer people, like, I think so often that is told through a straight lens, so it's extremely judgmental. And so we actually wanted to make something that was very sex positive and sort of shame free. Like the world is free of shame, it's very inclusive, and everybody just exists without having to explain who they are or why they're there. And the trade-off is there's actual demons. So that's how we justified it. But yeah, my husband and I, he wrote and directed it, and I acted and produced. And we crowdfunded it, and actually filmed it as a web series because we raised about $30,000, made the whole thing on our own, and then we put it through the festival circuit, and then that's how it got a distribution deal through Here TV, which is actually one of the longest running queer platforms in existence. They even have a cable channel going all the way back to Dante's Cove. Has anyone here ever heard of Dante's Cove? So that's a Here TV original, and our show is actually a little bit inspired by that. So anyway, and you can also see it on Amazon Prime, but yeah, the real reason we created it is we wanted to see it. And frankly, every time I've ever tried to sort of mold myself into what I thought people wanted me to be, it didn't work. And I ended up disappointing myself and everyone else. And I've just noticed that every time I've sort of done something unabashedly myself and we've presented ourselves unabashedly, like, that works. Because that's what people want to see. They want to see the authenticity, but they also want to see themselves represented. There's an audience. So I mean, how many people here are creatives and like make things? And like, I say this, I ask because it's like, don't be afraid to do exactly the thing you want to see. Don't worry if it's too gay or too whatever. Make it, because too different, because people want to see it. And like, we made this, like, it's a really diverse show. I think if we pitched this to a network, they'd be like, oh, no. Absolutely not. But when people see it, they're like, that's fun, and I can still relate to it. Like, we've shown this to totally straight horror crowds, because it is like in the horror genre, and they're like, that was fun. Like, yeah, look at that. We can be fun too. So anyway, that's really what we were going for, just like something that embraced what we wanted to see, who we were, was sort of unabashedly our sort of experience, and hopefully would bring people in at least through like just the story and the characters, and be like, hey, I can actually appreciate, I don't need to see myself exactly like straight white people don't have to see straight white people in order to enjoy a show. And that's kind of that was sort of our MO here. And so far so good. Awesome. I had never done a ComicCon panel before we made that show. So, I mean, so look at it that way.
Yay.
This was like one of my bucket list items, and look at that.
Check.
Made a super gay show, did a ComicCon panel. Hey.
Yes, exactly.
Be gay.
Exactly.
Two crimes.
One thing I would just like to throw in an add-on also that between what both Chance and Robert have just also said. The subject matters that they each are focusing on, that are finding power, are those examples of things that have been used as shame against us.
Yes, yes.
And especially if you also throw in religion standpoint in there too, that is one of the biggest culprits and biggest users of the tool of shame.
Yes.
Yes. And this is why restorative justice is really important, right? So those who understand restorative justice, which is basically honoring each other's points of views and understanding where that other person is coming from and understanding the harm and how to make that better. That's the essential essence of restorative justice. Now our next on our panel, we have Tara, who's I'd like to call my ride or die, because Tara has been on every single panel that I've asked her to be on. I'm like, please, this subject's really important to me. Can you talk? And she's always yes. I'm like, can you meet at 4 in the afternoon for an hour-long meeting to talk about this panel? She's always like, yes. So Tara has been working for Prism Comics, and she has her own publishing company, Stack Decked. I mean, like, she has established is not the first, or it is the first, isn't it? Owned and created LGBTQIA publishing company?
No, it's not, but...
Sorry,
but if you want to tell people that at a party, I'll play along. I'm okay with that. No. There are other queer-owned publishers. I'm not the first, but I'm my favorite.
Okay. You're my favorite too.
But yeah, I'm Tara Madison Avery, and I'm okay with being hypersexualized. I just want you all to know that if we're going to free ourselves from the bonds of shame, I will start by being immediately shameless. So I am a cartoonist and publisher, and a lot of my comics work as a cartoonist involves autobiography, the master genre of 90s indie comics, where every single person who worked for all of the little indie companies, the black and white companies, had to do an indie or an autobio comic to prove that they were serious. And one of my most recent stories is in a book called The Outside. This is not one that I published, but this is one that I appeared in. It's got 16 stories from all trans and non-binary cartoonists, and it's about their personal experience, about growing up weird, growing up trans, growing up non-binary, and sort of the confusions and difficulties that entails. In my case, I was quite clearly the oldest person to contribute to this book. I grew up in the 70s, which nobody else did. And so my story I call is the Who Me decade, because the 70s was famously the me decade. And when the 70s was a time before we had a lot of the language we have today. We didn't really have, the word transgender hadn't been coined. Transsexual was the word, and non-binary was not even on the radar in mainstream conversation, and so you're growing up as a little kid. There's even less opportunity to be out and proud about anything, and but people can tell you're not like them, and so this leads to lots of teasing, lots of in my day fist fights with Chucky Pisano next door, and another thing that was weird then that we kind of take for granted now, all of us, ComicCon is the destination for so many people every year, and comic conventions are cropping up faster than Starbucks. And reading comics and liking superheroes and stuff like that wasn't cool, If you had your Superman and Supergirl action figures and you thought you were styling, Chucky Pisano was going to come over and beat you up, and so you had to stand up and fight back. So a lot of these things that we have our own traumas and shame and problems, but we were a couple generations back. I mean, it was even dimmer light for us, So I wanted to do a little bit of that in my story called The Who Me Decade, and sort of capture, but still the fun and hope of it all. I mean, after all, comics are supposed to be fun, goddammit. I've worked with Prism Comics. We're an LGBTQ nonprofit organization promoting queer comics, queer readers, and queer fandom coast to coast, queer creators. And I've been a board member now for 10 years. So we just started our own convention. We're kind of proud of that, called QCon. One of the things that is important for us to do, one of my favorite things to do, is to go to places that are supposed to fly over country, where New York and LA and San Diego, that's great, but I want to go to Kansas City. I want to go to Salt Lake City. I want to go to Iowa. I want to go places where the queers are and people have forgotten that.
Florida.
Texas.
I'll just roll a tank into Florida. But yeah, it's we take for granted how relatively like the dearth of shame that we have here in California and in other coastal environments, but we forget that there are still places in this country where it is very much like it used to be 20, 30, 40 or more years ago. And that's one of my favorite things to do, is to go there and to set up shop and to see the people sort of come out of the woodwork. You sort of put up your own little bat signal, and the queers come to buy books and to tell you how grateful they are for you showing up there, and that really makes me happy. In any event, it's important. As a publisher, I really focus on representation, trying to make sure that the queer folks have their say. We published the first all transgender comics anthology, which is We're Still Here. So we won a Ignatz Award, which, if you're familiar with it, is just a brick on a piece of wood. But I was kind of pleased to get it. And recently, one of our most recent publication is 1001 Black Men. It's our first art book. Professor Awan Mance is an out queer black woman in San Francisco area who every day for several years decided to draw another black man who was either in her neighborhood or that she encountered in her travels. And after a while, it amounted to 1001 images, and we got them all into one book somehow. So I think it's very special, and I hope you guys come by Prism Comics table and check it out.
Yes, thank you so much. And unfortunately, our buddy Mark, he is stuck at the vaccine line. But you can see him if you do have badges. He will be talking on our Indigenous comic book, celebration of Indigenous comic book this afternoon in room 2 from 4:30 to 5:30. And on Sunday, we're back here at Friday, Friday we're back here in the library from 5 to 6 talking about Black, Indigenous people of color. So if you want to hear Mark, he does have some giveaways as well. But now I'm just going to open up the floor and give our giveaways. And the first person who asks a question, I'm going to give it to you, Chance. You pick and you give away your book, and let's have a question. Oh, I got one all the way in the back. She's standing up even. Oh, 10 minutes. Sorry.
She's telling us to wrap it up.
Okay, Chance, sorry about that. Chance, you choose.
Sure. Yes, please.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We can definitely talk about that. So Perry and I are looking at each other. It's like, who wants to take that? So Perry, you start and I'll jump in.
Yeah, that's also one of those areas that is just as equally as fraught with this situation as too, because I actually recognize as dyslexic. And it's one of those things that we're considering also under the umbrella.
Well, here, let me back up. So who knows what the word or what neurodivergent or neurodiverse, what does that mean? Okay, great. So just a real quick highlight. It was a sociologist term that came up in 1999 by Judy Singer, who recognized that autism is not a mental health condition, but a different way of thinking, and that it should be accepted. Everyone now, from dyslexia, anxiety, depression, all of that stuff, ADHD, et cetera, have accepted this as an umbrella term. And so now there are different terms to be called, just like the whole rainbow of LGBTQIA terms. I mean, I like the word neurovariant because neurodivergent for me, some people love that it's rebellious, but for me, because I'm a person of color, divergency has made me othered again, and I want a word that's more inclusive. So the other word that we've talked about and discovered was by Nick Walker, that came out in 2019, called neuroqueer. And I'm like, I love that. But anyways, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's perfect. That's a beautiful segue. Because also speaking of that aspect of neuroqueer, if you look at the CIIS podcast, there is an interview with Nick Walker talking about neuroqueer as well. Because the also thing that takes from that is that there is another issue of identity politics that also applies there with whether someone is going to say neurodiverse, neurodivergent, neurospicy.
Neurospicy is another one I like.
Exactly. So there's that intersectionality is seeing much the same issues that we're seeing with BIPOC, with LGBT, also happening with neurodiversity as well. And especially, and this is again where that shame element comes into it, many people in that singular idea of somebody who's neurodiverse have the more difficult cases in mind. And as that point, there's also that point where they infantize them. So the idea
or that speak for them, or feel that that person has no choice. Like, I'm sorry, I'm going to hate on autism on the spectrum, or what is it, love on the spectrum? I'm going to hate on that for a second because I only watched the first episode, and it was really difficult for me because there's not one autistic person in the crew, and they infantilized them, and they didn't allow them to make choices and speak, and it was very neurodivergent people have sexual preferences, and they should be able to choose, and should learn how to choose it instead of having someone else make that choice. So, any case.
Oh yeah, no, because that gets into what I'm talking about with the infantizing, in that idea that a neurodiverse person who, depending on where they are in that spectrum, can't have an interest in sex, can't have an interest in, or that their interest in the materials that have brought us here now is something that is, consuming their lives, and they'll never have anything else as part of what they're supposed to be doing. And that's part of that intersectionality that we hit with the, again, they're being made into a single story, a singular identity, as opposed to the intersectional identity.
Yes.
And all of those intersectional points provide strength and compensate for other places of weakness.
And I'm going to promote a LMFT therapist friend of mine, Finn Groton. They have wrote the book on supporting neurodivergent trans folks. So it's on Amazon. You can get that, pick that up. So that's my plug. But Natasha, and let me ask you, being a light skin in quotation, black, a queer woman growing up in the South, what was that like, your experiences for you? I mean, now that we're talking about shame, I think you have some really good stories, so please, if you feel, comfortable to
Let's make sure
share.
the book gets given
Oh
out
yeah,
while
and
we're
the
here,
book,
too.
and the book, come up here and grab your book, my friend.
And if you don't like it, you can give it to someone else.
And
Did you sign it? Did you sign it? Do you want to sign it? Okay, all right. Go ahead.
But I did want to say, I do think, I'm not a psychologist, but I do think there is a lot of, overlap and intersectionality when it comes to, being a person of color, being spicy. Because I do think that, especially growing up in the South, and so living in an area where I was very different. Even though both of my parents were military, we moved around a lot of the communities that I would come to be in, I was the weird kid. I was either the quiet kid or I was the uppity kid, or even amongst black, my black community, I was kind of like the light-skinned kid who you couldn't possibly have two black parents because of the way you speak or the things that you're interested in. And so there's a lot of that divisiveness that came about when I was growing up. And as Perry also mentioned, I grew up masking a lot. I grew up masking well into adulthood, a lot of code switching, and it's like both of my parents, my mother was a teacher after she retired from the military, and my father continued on, and it's just like having, growing up with anxiety and depression, and I was diagnosed very early. It's still that, it was just kind of like an unbelievable thing. It's like, are you sure that's what it is? Are you sure, can't you just get over it? Or you're being too emotional. And it's having, I'm so grateful for the times that we are in, as chaotic as it has been, as harmful as, some things have come out, but it's being able to find more community of people that do resonate or do share some of those things. And I think that is the most important thing that has helped me come to better deal with my anxiety and depression. Because growing up as a child, there was just no one that could understand why I was having a panic attack or having a breakdown, or I couldn't eat because just the thought of doing things out of order made me sick. And so it's, I think that now, again, it's just being open and honest with it in the places where you feel safe, because I think a lot of the times as growing up, it was just pent up. It was just pent up. I had no one to share those things with, so it caused so much more stress, because I'm constantly thinking about who is going to recognize something. Am I blending in enough? Does someone else know what I'm going through? And a lot of times they would be no, but going to college helped me find a larger community of people that did share in those, in my, my neurospiciness, as well as being queer, as well as being black, and it has helped me grow. My partner has helped me overcome a lot of things, and then to get into, when you become a real adult, and I've gotten therapy, it's like that has also helped me. And I want to pass too.
I'm going to give Tara the next question, because she has her giveaway. So
There's one right there. That was the first one. Yes, go ahead.
There you go. Masking and what? I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? Oh, masking your neurodiverse, diversity. Yeah.
I'm not a therapist, but by the way, you just won yourself a copy of The Outside. So,
and Mark is coming and presenting with our grace while Tara answers the question.
If I were to take it on the fly, it would probably be one is sort of trying to conceal how you express your gender and and who you're attracted to. Another might be trying to trim your habits and your perspectives to suit the requirements or expectations of other people, and so that you would restrict your observations to the kinds of observations you would expect people to expect you to make, or try to perform tasks in the same manner and on the same schedule as people expect of you, even though perhaps your approach to the same ideas is a bit unusual. I'm neurosomnolent, so I require a lot of caffeine and multiple naps a day to get anything done. But I don't think that's a real thing. But yeah, that would be how I would describe it if I were to just use my own lay understanding of it. So.
And the other thing about masking is sometimes, as a person of color, we have to mask in order to survive, in order to be safe. And as a queer person, you would have to do that as well, right? You would have to understand that masking can be good. We do want to be our own authentic selves, but sometimes it's a matter of survival. It's a matter of understanding harm, where that could be. And often, I think many of us here on the panel have done this, whether it's amongst friends or family, trying to keep safe and be safe. And so one of the things Perry and I experience is that when we're talking with other therapists, especially therapists who are white and have not experienced the fear of death, are pushing their clients to be authentic, but sometimes we can't be. Did you want to say anything about that?
Oh, no, you've covered pretty much there, because no matter what, any of these things is equally an aspect of how are you surviving? What are you doing to survive in the environment that you find yourself in? Because there's and I sum this up in some other, when I'm also working with clients, I'm dealing with trauma and so forth. How you survive in the desert is different than how you survive in the jungle. And if the only thing that you're dealing with thinks about how to survive in this forest has never experienced the desert. There's different ways of thinking, different ways of doing to survive, to get your food, to get your water, even the creatures you're going to be dealing with. How many poisonous things do you find in a normal forest compared to the desert?
And now that we have 1 minute left, Mark, did you want to give a hot take on who you are and your comic book, and then we're going to get kicked out of here.
For sure. Hey guys, first of all, I'm so sorry I was late. I thought leaving at 6 from LA would be enough, but apparently it is not. So anyway, hi, my name is Mark. I'm one of the co-founders of Duwata Comics. It's an indie, diversity-focused comic book company, and I think if we can go directly to the next slide, just to kind of go from the point of masking. I wanted to share that for the longest time, I think masking has been a defense mechanism for me. So I'm actually going to show this character in particular is a character that we're actually debuting for the first time here at ComicCon today, super late.
You guys are the first ones to know. Woo!
But what I wanted to really kind of focus on is this character is not a new character in my head. In fact, the character you see on the left in the center was the original character, but I think I was kind of putting my psyche in let's just say a white character, because I thought that's how I needed to sort of portray and protect myself. But I think now I chose the artist to totally represent this in a much more authentic way for me by actually picking her because she was so amazing at portraying individuals of color. And I think that's important because I think putting ourselves authentically is, let's just say, means the world for everybody, but also it can have an impact on so many other folks looking at you for the same reason, and the relatability is so much there. But yeah, I think if anything, but sometimes it doesn't happen overnight. It's a different journey for each and every individual person. For me, it took much further into my adult years than I realized, where it wasn't necessarily a full coming out to every single individual, but parts to everyone, especially if you come from a more conservative culture, such as myself.
Yep.
So again, apologize for being super late, but so happy to be here regardless.
Yay! And once again, we've got lots of panels inside and outside. We'd love to see you at our next one. Thank you again so much. Thank you, ComicCon, for having us.
Yes, and if you want to see Demon Hunter, I have passes here to watch it for free.
Yes, if you want to watch Demon Hunter for free, we've got the code, so come on up. Or no, actually, we're getting kicked out, so we got to go over there.
This is my participation badge.
I'm also giving away 2 comics each, one of our first edition and our second edition as well.
Woohoo!
Sehr, sehr gut.